Hello, dear beloved. In our last video, we talked about the fifth trumpet and how Islam attacked the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Now we will take a look at the sixth trumpet. Before we begin, subscribe to my channel for more Bible-based content and click on that bell icon so you do not miss further videos. Let's begin. Now we will begin with the book of Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 14. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. When the sixth trumpet angel sounded, a voice comes from the horns of the golden altar, described in the introduction to the trumpets. Euphrates means rushing and is used to represent invading armies. Let's look at the book of Isaiah chapter 8 verses 7 through 8. Now therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth up upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria in all his glory, and he shall come up over his channel, and go over all of his banks, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over. He shall reach to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel. The river Euphrates, on which Babylon sits, symbolize people, multitudes, nations, and tongues worldwide. The four angels are those which hold back to some degree strife among the peoples of the world. Their loosening here results in the Islamic Turks slaying Eastern Rome politically. Incidentally, the literal Euphrates begins in the territory of the Islamic Turks. Let's move on to verse 15. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. Tormenting was turned to slaying the third part of men. Eastern Rome would be politically slain. This period amounts to 391 years and 15 days, during which Ottoman supremacy was to exist in Constantinople, commencing when the 150 years ended on July 27, 1449. The period would end August 11, 1840. Judging from the manner of the commencement of the Ottoman supremacy, that it was by voluntary acknowledgement on the work of the Greek emperor, they only reigned by permission of the Turkish Sultan, we should naturally conclude that the fall or departure of Ottoman independence would be brought about in the same way, that as the end of the specified period, the Sultan would voluntarily surrender his independence into the hands of the Christian powers, from whom he received it. Allowing that the 391 years, 15 days commenced at the close of the first period, and would end on the 11th of August 1840, when the Ottoman power of Constantinople may be expected to be broken. In 1840, the Ottoman Empire was without hope in a war with Egypt. England, Russia, Austria, and Prussia stepped in to sort it out. The Ottoman Sultan submitted to their dictates, voluntarily recognizing their supremacy. The ultimatum drawn up by these powers was handed to the Pasha of Egypt on August 11, 1840. Where was the Ottoman authority? In the hands of the Christian powers? The event exactly fulfilled Lich's prediction. Many were convinced that the Advent movement had correct principles of prophetic interpretation, and a wonderful impetus was given to the Advent movement. The Ottoman Empire limped along as the sick man of Europe until the end of the First World War. Neither its existence nor its atrocities ended in every sense of 1840, any more than they had begun in every sense of the 1450s. But its period of dominance over Christian affairs, its power to slay, can be significantly identified with the 391 years here spoken thereof. This remarkable fulfillment of prophecy contributed greatly to Advent movement, which was then underway. Another of the last signs to precede Christ's return had been fulfilled. It greatly stimulated missionary zeal and helped convince people that the year-day principle was valid. Years later, one writer said that it was to the Advent movement what the power of steam is on the railroad locomotive. So from the 11th day of August 1840, the Advent cause and message, or angel, careered on its way with greater power than ever before. Returning to events near the beginning of the 391 years, we read of an army in battle. Though the emperor at Constantinople had submitted to Turkish supremacy in 1449, the next Sultan, Muhammad II, set his heart on conquering Constantinople, the capital of Eastern Rome. Verse 16 tells us this: "And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them." As John had heard the number of the sealed saints in Revelation 7, he heard the number of the Ottoman cavalry. In the Greek, 2 myriads, countless. Incidentally, the Turks numbered using tomans, which are the same as myriads. The myriads of Turkish horse overspread a frontier of 600 miles from Taurus to Erzurum, and the blood of 130,000 Christians was a grateful sacrifice to the Arabian prophet. Verse 17, "And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone." John saw their uniforms of red, blue, and yellow. The breastplates of the high priest were gold, blue, purple, and scarlet. The locust breastplates are here described as of fire, jacinth, and brimstone. Literal locusts can be colored red, yellow, and blue. Red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors. Incidentally, red, yellow, and blue were the prevalent colors of the Ottomans' uniforms. From their first appearance, the Ottomans have affected to wear warlike apparel of scarlet, blue, and yellow, a descriptive trait the more marked from its contrast to the military appearance of the Greeks, Franks, Saracens, who were contemporary. As the command to fire came from their leaders' mouths, the Ottomans' artillery unleashed fiery destruction. This is symbolized as fire and smoke and brimstone issuing from their mouths. Fire, smoke, and brimstone was this agent of destruction. Under a barrage of enormous cannons blasting fire, smoke, and brimstone, Constantinople, and with it 1/3 part of men, the Roman Empire, was slain. Long before they were invented, John here beheld the use of firearms. At the time Constantinople fell, firearms were relatively new weapons. The Arabs actually invented the first guns, and possibly even gunpowder itself. The Turks used firearms, which were relatively new weapons, and firearms which discharged on horseback even appeared as fire from their horses' mouths. The Muslims placed their cannon in an effective position. The gates and ramparts of Constantinople were pierced in 1,000 places. The flames which issued from the mouths of these instruments of warfare, of brazen and fiery jaws, cast grief and dismay among the miscreants. The smoke which spread itself in the air rendered the brightness of the day somber as night, and the face of the world soon became as dark as the black fortune of the unhappy infidels. Verse 18 says this: "By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths." By the use of firearms, the third part of men, the Eastern Roman Empire, was indeed slain. The volleys and lances and arrows were accompanied with the smoke, the sound, and the fire of the musketry and cannon. The long order of the Turkish artillery was pointed against the walls, 14 batteries thundering at once on the most accessible places. The fortifications, which had stood for ages against hostile violence, were dismantled on all sides by the Ottoman cannon. Many breaches opened, and near the gate of St. Romanus 4 towers leveled with the ground. From the lines, the galleys, and the bridge, the Ottoman artillery thundered on all sides. The camp and city, the Greek and the Turk, were involved in a cloud of smoke, which could only be dispelled by the final deliverance or destruction of the Roman Empire. The double walls were reduced by the cannon to a heap of ruins. The Turks, at length, rushing through the breaches, Constantinople was subdued, her empire subverted, and her religion trampled in the dust by the Muslim conquerors. Verse 9 says this: For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. Power means authority, and mouth is a nation's voice, a leader, or spokesman. A tale is a false prophet, one who teaches lies. Satan deceived a third of the angels with his lies, or his tale. The power of the Turks was in their civil mouth, and religious leaders the tail. Incidentally, the horse's tail was a well-known Turkish standard, a symbol of office and authority. The horse tail standard was actually used as a military standard to rally around in battle. Apparently, a Turkish general, not knowing how to rally his troops who had lost their standard, cut off a horse's tail and fixed it to a spear. The troops rallying around the tail gained the victory, and thereafter the horse's tail became a symbol of office. Anyone looking on a body of cavalry with such banners or ensigns would be struck with the unusual, remarkable appearance, and would speak of their banners as concentrating and directing their power. The ensign of 1, 2, or 3 horsetails that marks distinctively the dignity and power of the Turkish Pasha. The recent overthrow of the Mamluk power in Egypt by the Ottomans had extended the shadow of the horsetails for along the coast of Africa. Verse 20 and 21 says this: And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils, and idols of gold, and silver, and brass, and stone, and of wood, which neither can see, nor hear, nor walk, neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. Sadly, the fall of Western Rome under the first 4 trumpets and the fall of Eastern Rome under the 5th and 6th trumpets did not result in apostate Christian Rome repenting of their idolatry. Murders and sorceries, fornications, and thefts still exist in the apostate church today. The hordes of Saracens and Turks were let loose as a scourge and punishment upon apostate Christendom. Men suffered the punishment, but learned nothing. We learn that God in His providence allowed Islam to arise and peak in power at the very time the papacy was seeking to destroy Protestantism in Europe. Islam distracted the papacy from its goal and thus preserved Protestantism. When a crisis arose in the affairs of the Reformation, and the kings obedient to the Roman see had united their swords to strike, and with blow so decisive that they should not need to strike a second time, the Turk, obeying one whom they knew not, would straightway present himself on the eastern limits of Europe, and in so menacing an attitude that the swords unsheathed against poor Protestants had to be turned in another quarter. The Turk was the lightning rod that drew off the tempest. Thus did Christ cover His little flock with their shield of the Muslim. It is you, said the adherents of the old creed, addressing the Lutherans, who have brought this scourge upon us. It is you who have unloosed these angels of evil. They come to chastise you for your heresy. You have cast off the yoke of the Pope, and now you must bear the yoke of the Turk. Not so, said Luther. It is God who had unloosed this army, whose king is Abaddon the Destroyer. They have been sent to punish us for our sins, our ingratitude for the gospel, our blasphemies, and above all, our shedding of the blood of the righteous. In the 16th and 17th centuries, support and encouragement for Protestantism and Calvinists were one of the fundamental principles of Ottoman policy. This Roman Empire still stands today, and they have not changed. Therefore, there must be a seventh trumpet, which has not yet sounded. This final and seventh trumpet will destroy this empire for all of eternity. And this is none other than the second coming of Christ. This final trumpet will be the end of all this wickedness, and death will be at their door. The book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verses 16 and 17 says this. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Friends, Jesus is coming soon. I urge you to give your hearts to him now. And this concludes the 7 trumpets of Revelation. If you enjoyed this series, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss any of my content in the future. This is John Tinsley with Everlasting Rock Ministries, and always remember, the truth never fails. God bless you.